in Texas Aggie first down.
And welcome to the first episode of Yell, Fight, Sooie, college football from three friendly-ish rivals. And welcome to the very first episode of Yell, Fight, Sooie. And if you follow Let's Get To, if you listen to Go Astros, these are faces that you know already. We've got producer of Let's Get To, Andy Tom Chesson, and proud A&M grad. How's it going, Andy?
We're doing well. In that weird void of college football where we have week 0 games coming up, and I'm not interested in any of them, but
I was going to say, this is the one time Nebraska will move the needle on this show by making a start now. And then we got Scott McIntyre, big fan. He's the hog in more ways than one. Oh, that was rude. See, I'm a little more spicy on a football show, Scott.
I'm good with that. Just if you're going to dish it, be ready to take it.
Yeah, but I mean, in this particular joke, never mind.
No, if we could start out of the gate right there. I mean, you see the emblem you're wearing on you. I mean, just because you get preseason votes every year doesn't mean you're a great team.
I was referring, I shouldn't tell you what I was referring to when I called you a hog. What was your girth?
Well, yeah, I mean, but I didn't realize you've seen me with my pants down, but I appreciate that.
Wow, we are off and running. Been a weird offseason, and Andy, you're right, because it is a weird point in sports now, because we both are obviously big baseball fans. Our teams are doing well, and therefore August baseball is boring and lame. And then none of our guys kick off for another 8 days or so. But I heard a funny poll, or a fun poll, and the poll, it was on CNN today, and it was ranking the most popular sports in the United States. And the whole debate was where college football fell. I'm sure you can guess what number 1 was, right?
Major League Indoor Lacrosse.
Gotta be.
Yes, Andrew, the Major League Indoor Lacrosse. Obviously, NFL number 1.
Sure.
College football was number 3. What was number 2?
I'm going to guess the NBA. Don't know.
Scott, you want to take a guess?
Yeah, I would probably be with Andy too on that.
Actually, Major League Baseball has risen in popularity, which means I guess we have to, and it came in at number 2, percentage points ahead of college football. And then behind them were the NHL and then both basketball leagues. I don't know why that's important, except for we are all afraid of our baseball sport dying, and maybe it's not.
Well, because it shows that Rob Manfred has his hands around the pulse of the heartbeat of the nation just perfect.
It is interesting, but it's a little bit disingenuous, and I'll tell you why. Baseball is important, and probably more important to the people in the Northeast, especially in the large media markets of Boston and New York, and to some extent Los Angeles, than college football is.
Yeah,
college football is a non-entity in the state of New York, despite the fact Syracuse plays there, despite the fact that Rutgers is a thing every now and then. It's just not. And so media and advertisers will focus their efforts on the South. And now, as I think we're going to lead into a little bit today, really focusing on the Big Ten and what they're bringing to the table as a media partner, because that's where football lives. It lives in the South and it lives in the Midwest.
And to your point, in that poll, they said something only like 20% of people in the sort of New York to New England area even identify themselves as college football fans versus 70% from the SEC territory into Texas. And then, like you said, up to the Midwest. So, yeah, but anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was kind of fun. And I think you hit the nail on the head. But yeah, the sport is changing, and it's interesting. And I'll keep drawing allusions to baseball, particularly in this first episode, since we're going to have a lot of carryover, I think. But, we talk about baseball as this sport that I think can survive its change. College football seems almost recognizable to what it was certainly when I went to school. I assume when you guys went to school. Overall, we'll start with you, Andy. Just where do you see this realignment thing happening? The Big Ten get the big TV deal. Are you happy with where it's going?
I mean, we're all men of a certain age, right? So at some point we were all in the same conference as fans together. We might not have known each other, but the Southwest Conference was a thing up until 1992. Arkansas was a member of that conference. It certainly has evolved in ways that I don't think a lot of people enjoy right now. I think the idea of the NIL, the large media markets, the cannibalization of the conferences, and the loss of some of your regional rivalries has changed the face of football. And really, if you look at who you would consider the blue bloods of the sport, and I'm not going to get into who that is right now, because I know at least one person on this call thinks they are blue blood.
Is it talking about me or you, Scott? Okay, we'll get there.
I said at least. You really, the powers that used to live in California aren't the powers anymore. The power is centralized in the Southwest or Southeast Conference, is centralized in the Big Ten, as we talked about. And even in the Big Ten, it's among a few teams. Both groups are rapidly expanding. And if it feels like we're not talking about the Big 12 or the ACC or the Pac, whatever they are left now, or the other group of five.
Pac not gonna work here anymore.
Exactly. And you've got this other group of five. There's a caste system that's happening in football kind of before our eyes, and I don't think we're done. I think all three of us are going to end up on the good side, quote unquote, of what the shakeup ends up looking like. But right now, it's still in flux, as witnessed with the fact that Texas is waiting to find out if they're going to be in the SEC in 23 or 24 or 25. USC and UCLA are going to join the Big Ten in however many years that is, 2 years, 1 year. And there's still movement to be had because both leagues are looking at the ACC with kind of drooling mouths going, what can we get out of there? What meat can we pull? While they have a grant of rights till 2036, 2035.
Yeah.
So it's a long ways away. And then you've got Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal, Arizona schools, Texas Tech to an extent, sitting out there waiting to be poached by somebody, Kansas as well, as a basketball team. So there's a lot still to be had. We're just kind of in the middle of it right now. From a football perspective, college football has never been better with the product on the field than it is right now.
Yeah, and I think I know in this show we'll talk about playoff expansion. I think it's necessary. But Scott, I mean, how much for me is this the sport where I get to be a grumpy old man? Because I didn't really love the pre-BCS era as far as randomly picking champions. Now I look at the BCS era as the good old days because of certain realities. But is this just sort of part of it? Are we just evolving and we should hold judgment till we see what the final evolution is?
Yeah, because I do agree with Andy completely. We're in the first steps of all this, right? All this realignment is just now shaking out. USC and UCLA were the huge drop of the bucket, and then the TV rights deal that comes along afterwards for the Big Ten. I think that in and of itself starts setting the framework. First of all, they're trying to rise up and say, okay, SEC, you and your deal with ABC, ESPN, we are your competitors. We are showing this, and they were blatant. And the Big Ten went after the format that worked for the NFL. When I have a big game on one channel, then another one on another channel, and then you'll flip to the other channel. The amount of money that Big Ten schools are projected to get by 2025 is like 162 million each. That's insane. If you consider right now that people think that SEC schools getting 40-50 million dollars a year, you consider that to be insane. I went to public school in Arkansas, but I know that 162 million is a lot more. So I think that what we're about to see is not only first of all, you're going to have networks, and then somebody's going to come along and do the streaming job better, and you're going to see other conferences aligning up with the streaming channels, and they're going to be all of these competing conferences with their own little network that they're coming with, or a group of networks. That's what it looks like. And then, of course, the one big linchpin, as Andy pointed out, the ACC, everybody wants to go poach from there, but man, they're expensive to get because of that grant of rights agreement that carries on for another, almost 15 years. So the big prize in the pool starts being Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's individual contract with NBC has paid them so much. It was comparable with with other conferences. But 162 million is a lot more than what Notre Dame's making on their individual games too. So they might well make it land.
Okay, we've dealt with some technical issues. Scott is in fact back now. All right, so we were just talking about just essentially the whole thing's going asunder. And Scott, I mean, Andy, one of the things that kind of made me, or the thing I'm the most curious about, it seems no one else really wants the other Pac-12 teams outside of UCLA and USC. I don't know what Big 12 teams are going to still be around at a sort of a major college football level. What schools do you think will get left out that maybe shouldn't?
I think a school like Kansas, who does that, they suck at football. They historically suck at football. It's like once every 20 years they manage to make a bowl game. I mean, they're not a good historical power team, but they bring the basketball to a conference that might want basketball. That'll be interesting. Stanford, I don't think cares. I don't think Cal really cares. Yes, they all want the TV money, no matter how much they want to pump their chest about academics are important to us and we only want to associate with a certain kind of teams. Both those teams play in a conference currently with Washington State. So any conversation they have about the academic prowess of a school or how much they really pride themselves on top level athletic competition, that's out the window when you have Washington State sitting in your conference. Similar to Texas thumping their chest about how the Big 12 was an academic powerhouse back in the day, but you still have Tech sitting there and their 200th ranked college.
Well, you still had Nebraska there with their partial qualifiers at that time. So
yeah, I mean, so it's all of that is a lot of lip service. I don't know that there's going to be a team left out that you can pick on one, because I think what we're going to end up having is 40 teams at the end of the day. So it's going to be a whole lot easier to talk about who's in versus who got left out. I think there's going to be some rough cut. If you had to pick a team right now, I don't know. Maybe somebody like a University of Miami who hasn't done well. They had a great 20-year run, but before that they weren't good. And after that, they haven't been that good. Maybe that's something. I'm not picking on Miami. I don't really think they're going to be left out. Arizona schools are probably going to get left out. The state of Arizona will probably get left out.
But again, whenever you talk about Arizona, you talk about a program, a basketball program at least that has been a powerhouse. Been
and I think that's
that
kind
way.
of the unknown is how much do these schools value the television dollars from basketball. And I keep in mind that the NCAA makes money on basketball. They do not make any money on Division I football, or at least not directly right now.
Right.
The playoffs are a separate entity from the NCAA. The conferences, by and large, are operating separately from the NCAA, although there's some lip service given to their oversight. That's going to go away at some point. And so if your big draw as a college, Arizona, Kansas, Villanova, is that you play basketball really, really well, all right, I don't care. I got my game streaming on Apple and Amazon, and I get $1 billion a year. Enjoy your bouncy ball through the hoopy thing.
But Scott, I think Andy's kind of pointed out, I think one of the hard things about this conversation macro wise, a lot of this is not just dealing with, and we'll talk about NIL a lot on this show, but NIL is also part of it. And I don't think anybody on this broadcast thinks that schools should be able to make billions and billions of dollars on the backs of unpaid labor. Like, I don't think any of us feel that way. But on the other hand, it does seem like we are stepping towards what we already know, which is college football being the minor leagues of the NFL. And Andy, Andy made a comment, Scott, about, I am proud of the academic prowess of the University of Texas. Andy, I know you're proud of the academic prowess of Texas A&M. And it does seem like, I don't know if I want a situation where we completely separate those two things. And I can see a world where that's where we're heading.
Oh, I think we already have.
Yeah,
I think that ship sailed a long time ago. The correlation of academics to athletics is the notion of the scholar athlete. That looks really neat on paper, and it probably is still the case with non-revenue generating sports like golf and tennis and things like that, where I don't have
rodeo, as we discussed on Let's Get To a couple of weeks ago.
even
Indoor
baseball,
lacrosse.
because of the number of scholarships that you can't have. So you want people that are good enough to really qualify for an academic scholarship. Football's not that case. It's just not. If I got 85 guys that I just need them to be able to pass a class, academics don't matter that much. They really don't. When we're talking strictly about sports, and especially when we're talking about NIL deals, it's that personality that comes through. So, we've all known, and this has happened since the 40s and the 50s. Whenever somebody's a good athlete, but they're dumb as a bag of bricks, schools pass them through. Man, these guys get grades that we knew the athletes that we were in school that did and didn't show up for class. And the guys that still made a B, even though they showed up 2 times the whole semester.
Forrest Gump has a degree from the University of Alabama.
Forrest Gump has a degree from the University of Alabama. And why?
We actually don't know if he
could-
graduated, to be fair.
Yeah, he did. He did. Remember? Because that's when.
In the book he graduates. Okay.
He graduates in the movie, guys. He graduates in the movie. That's whenever they find him for, when the Marine or whoever was the.
That was at graduation?
Yeah, they recruited him at graduation.
Okay, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
You know how to talk like Forrest Gump, right? You just have to talk like Al, or how do you talk about Al Gore? You talk like Forrest Gump, and then you make him just a little bit softer.
Jim's about to find out how all of the Forrest Gumps talk in 3 weeks, because they're invading Austin, Texas.
Yes, they will be, if they can find it on a map.
But I think NIL is the huge deal, right? And they've got to get their hands around this, because you can't just pay guys left and right. And what happens at other sports on individual levels, if you're paying people, but yet the rules of that professional sport say you can't be paid, it's amateur. NIL still has things to work out, but it's important to get these players the players paid. But at the same time, you got to have rules and regulations around it, or as we've seen in the 70s and 80s in our own Southwest Conference, people will go nuts.
Looking at you, SMU. Look, Andy, it's interesting because the NIL is the thing now, and I think people saw how it worked out initially, or how it's working out initially. I think that's how it's going to be. I have argued long and hard, and will continue to long and hard. I will continue to argue that way, that I think that we're going to see many more evolutions of this. And I do think teams, not only that have, like you and I, Andy, we have the benefit of big oil money that are supporting our schools, right? The only way Texas gets that recruiting class after going 5 and 7 is because you can offer them the NIL money. But I also think, and I think the reason why Nick Saban was nervous about it all, is it isn't just about that, but it's also going to be about schools located near or at major commercial centers where media is created, where you can start to work on your brand. If you're the top rated quarterback in USC, you can already start making inroads with advertising and that kind of thing. I think we're going to see a whole other evolution of this. And I think it's going to help you, Andy. It's going to help the team in Austin. It's going to help the team in LA, but I don't know it's going to help the team in Greenbow, Alabama. Wrong Alabama city, but I don't know your thoughts.
So you and I differ on this a little bit, because I think that, and I will use A&M as an example. Yeah, we're 90 minutes away from Houston, which is a top 10 media market. We're not too far away, 120 miles or 120 miles from Austin. We're close to Dallas, close to San Antonio. You have some benefit of some of those natural marketing things, but College Station is not where people are going to flock to begin their media career. And that's fine. We have hungry alumni who are going to make up that difference. And I think your big schools, those 40 that I'm talking about ending up at the end of the day, are going to find a way, regardless of what geographic market they're located in. Because I'll give you a good example. The University of Houston is not going to be one of those 40 teams at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And they fit in a top 10 media market. Rice is not going to be one of those. And it comes down to alumni involvement versus geographic benefit. Alabama is always going to be at the top of the food chain because their alumni might be dumb as posts, but they are committed to that program. And the guys that do have money, that's one of their children.
I'm glad this show wasn't called Y'all Fight Sooie Roll or something, because we would be.
All right, well, let's pick on Florida. Florida is not going to have any issues either because they have wealthy alumni, whether it's oil money or not. USC is not going to have an issue, but USC, if they had the same motivated alumni, Penn State's going to be there at the end of the day. Notre Dame's going to be there at the end of the day. It's the
Right.
big teams that have history and alumni that are willing to foot the bill.
I am just saying there's an evolution to this where if you are a Doritos and you can go get a college athlete for half of what it costs to get an NFL athlete,
Sure.
you are going to do that. And those schools located near those areas are going to have a natural advantage.
Sure, but they also do regional advertising. And regional advertising
Right. A
often
national brand is going to go.
Sure,
This is one where I'm not willing to coalesce on it because again, it's the industry in which I work and I'm looking at this thing 10 years from now, not
I'm not questioning
now.
your knowledge. I just don't think it's going to be quite as we lost Scott.
Scott ran away. He was sad.
I'm here, guys.
I'm not questioning your knowledge of the industry. I just think that college football is its own individual beast to the point that the alumni will make up differences where media markets don't exist.
Right. I just don't know if they're going to be able to consistently make up the difference. I mean, look, Oklahoma already had used car dealerships hiring Rhett Bomar
Oh, sure.
way
And
before.
But I think, but what you
Yeah.
guys are arguing about is a non-regulated system. The system is new, so it's not regulated. It's about to be regulated, and I think that lessens the impact. Because look, you're both touching on the exact correct point, and that is the NCAA is not going to, and the television networks now who have a very vested interest in this all across the board are not going to let the blue bloods of their sport just fall by the wayside. They're not going to let it happen. So I do think that Jim's right. Right now in this environment, completely agree with Jim that being in that huge market is going to be a big deal because there's more there, right? There's more commercial opportunity. But as this gets more regulated, as they get their hands around it, as there suddenly become avenues to cheat again, they will the global impact.
And somehow
will
the
be less.
Astros will get blamed for the cheating. Whatever happens is somehow going to be Jim Crane's fault. No,
Well,
I understand what you're saying,
either them
Scott.
or
And
A&M for giving somebody a gold Camaro.
I completely agree.
It was
I
a
think that
Trans Am, and we didn't continue the payments on that. Thank you very much. SMU took over the lease.
yeah. I look, obviously no one knows, this is the great unknown. I just think that schools that are already blue bloods are going to have a little bit easier time taking advantage of this. I don't think it's going to elevate University of Houston. I don't think it's going to elevate Texas State. But you already have, I mean, heck, what's to stop? Who's starting at quarterback for A&M this year?
We don't know because Jimbo Fisher won't tell us.
Okay, well, it's like the Dusty Baker school of depth
But
charts.
he's going to be really, really good, and that's why they
No,
went too
he's
high.
just
and now he's
trying
the
to-
face of Halliburton. Like what?
No, but I think regulation is going to come into play. I think they're going to try federal regulation, and I don't know how well that's going to work because the labor board has basically already spoken that you can't take money away from these kids.
If you're the face of Halliburton, by the way, do you have to get shot with birdshot? So, never mind. Dick Cheney joke. Go ahead.
that is a.
You mean
bonus.
back when we had Republicans, we could. Oh boy. Okay, never mind. We're gonna. We don't lose all the viewers. We're gonna get him. Oh, they're unsubscribed.
But I think where you're going to see the real regulation on things like NIL is when you start condensing into two leagues and the Big Ten and the SEC are going to agree on what the regulations are. Because right now you have 50 different sets of regulations as each state determines. So Texas and Texas A&M are actually at an NIL disadvantage because we are not allowed to offer high school students NIL deals. You can argue
which explains Quinn Ewers going to Ohio State.
Yes.
And then coming right back. Yeah.
But you can argue about whether or not it's happening or not, but the rules in Texas are that we can't offer high school kids NIL deals. You can't use NIL to entice to a school. Whereas in Florida, that's not real. Those aren't things and when you have that imbalance, that's where it becomes tricky. And that's what I think Nick Saban, as grumpy as an old crap heap that I think he is an incredible coach. And he's not wrong that he's fighting a battle for recruits with his hands tied behind his back. If the state of Alabama doesn't say you can do the same thing as Florida or California or wherever the most liberal states are in regards to this kind of law, there's going to be an attempt at federal regulation, but I think the real regulation, the real tying in is those top 40 teams agreeing these are the rules we're going to play by.
And Alabama will have, I think to your point, Alabama will have
because then you know what you're cheating against. Right now, it can't be cheating because nobody knows what the cheating would look like.
Well, but the whole thing, whenever you're talking
This
about
is 1998, Scott. We got a home run race. No one cares.
Because I'm holding on to the past. Look, when you were the one of the 9 schools that weren't in the state of Texas and everybody else was out to get you, you remain paranoid for the rest of your life. That is the life of an Arkansas Razorback fan.
That
period.
Walmart money hadn't kicked in yet.
That Tyson Walmart JB Hunt money just and all
Not
their
there
partners. Yet. It's there. Which is, we're preseason ranked too. Let's not forget. Hey, we're all ranked in the preseason.
I don't think Texas is in. Texas is not pre.
You're in the coaches poll. Somebody gave you a first place vote in the coaches
they did.
poll.
And everybody thought it was Sark, and Sark is like, I don't have a vote.
But it elevated you to number 18 in the coaches poll with that one vote. So congrats.
Yeah. So expectations are there, but don't worry. 6-6 will look great. But we're going to see. I got that in. He didn't even get mad at me. I was expecting him to get mad at me.
It's not my nature to respond to stuff like that, though.
Okay.
It just isn't.
Well, that's true.
And I think
That's
I don't know.
true.
I mean, I think I fan differently, and that's going to be interesting as we debate this. I like you talked already about the fact that like I'm bummed that the academics doesn't matter anymore. Like I celebrate the fact that we are a top 10 public university in the country, and as much as I care about winning football games. And so that I honestly worry about my long-term lifeblood as a fan of this sport, the more it keeps detracting from what I think makes the sport special. Andy, you had a comment.
Well, we got away from that a little bit on the academic piece. I don't think individual schools have stopped caring about their academics any more than they ever did. I don't think there's nobody telling UT that, hey, academics don't matter. What doesn't matter anymore is this idea that the Pac-10 is only going to take the top of the top academic institutions to be part of their athletic conference. The Big Ten also had a similar thing where you had to be an AIA level research university. And I'm probably messing up A1A, or A1A is a highway.
Beachfront Avenue.
There's a specific designation for research universities. And by and large, up until the last round of expansion, the Big Ten, we would not take a team that is not one of those things. Nebraska got in and then lost that designation. But what I'm saying is now expansion, because there's only a finite number of those types of institutions, doesn't matter on the macro scale.
Here's the challenge to that, though. Everybody, the best unkept secret is that Texas is not going to the Big Ten because they wouldn't take OU because they don't meet that criteria.
Or because the dirt burglars are a bunch of savages and nobody wants them in their conference. I mean, that's also a thing.
We need to track things we're glad the show isn't called. Like, now I'm so glad it's not Yell, Fight, Sooie, Boomer. I mean, actually, I'm super glad about that. I don't know if I would do it, but anyway.
Roll Boomer Tide? Real Boomer Tide. That'd be an interesting show, huh? Two guys in crimson and white screaming at each other for 45 minutes. Sounds great.
It's just words.
I think that's Skip and Shannon. I think that's the other show. I think, guys, look, as far as academics go, that's great for academics, but football is football, and people aren't coming out. There's not going to be 100,000 people there to see the Quiz Bowl.
Look, I get that, but I also don't want to see Texas start to like drastically lower. Like the other thing is I work at a college preparatory. I know what it takes to get into Texas A&M versus what it takes to get into LSU and Alabama. And I don't want to see Texas and A&M drop to that level, therefore harming the academic reputation of that university.
I think that I think that when you talk about how many students you have at Texas, treating the football players, treating the 85 scholarship football players a little differently than you treat the rest of the student body. First of all, that's expected. So secondly,
55,000.
I don't think you have to lower. It's a drop in the bucket. If you let 85 guys in who may not meet the standards perfectly, but we're going to get them through because they're really helping the school. That doesn't hurt the percentages.
It's probably 15 of them of the 85.
But that's what I'm saying. Even if it was all 85, still just statistically, that means nothing. It's not going to lower any standards. It's just not enough of them.
And historically, and I know schools have different acceptance rates, but historically, from a football player perspective, Notre Dame and Stanford are the only teams that really, really keep them at the same level as students. Every school for football players has an athletic minimum requirement that's set by the NCAA. Notre Dame and Stanford, and maybe Texas is, I don't know, but Notre Dame and Stanford are the two that keep it at the level of all the other students on campus.
I'm just saying every Longhorn player to do an interview at post Vince Young could speak. So, I mean, that's a.
When did Selvin, or not Selvin, who was the backpack guy?
Cedric Benson.
Romance Taylor.
He left, Cedric Benson?
No, Romance Taylor.
Oh, yeah. But he never really spoke to the media. But like we have Emmanuel Acho and Sam Acho. Look at those guys writing books. I don't know. It's something that,
And by and large, those are the players who are going to do well. And our perception of what a good college athlete is anyway, those are the guys you're going to focus on more than Marcus Latimer or other guys who literally went to the NFL not being able to read, Dexter Manley.
And look, I will also
realize that Cedric Benson went to Texas, but I love his hits. Give me the night and on Broadway.
I actually took a math class with Cedric Benson. It was Daryl Johnson thought I was funny.
That is really, really great that he was able to stay awake, seeing as he suffered the dregs of narcolepsy later on in his career.
Yeah.
While driving.
And I think it's interesting. Like one of the things that people, as they follow the show and it becomes the show, is, everybody has everybody brings their own baggage to the table. Everybody has their own prism with which they view things. And, it's like you teach history. Well, I'm going to teach history through how I view it. There's no hard and facts truth, really, right? When we're talking about interpreting things. But, for me, I am a bit of an academic elitist. You both know that I find nothing more irritating than hearing a guy talk about Texas tradition than I found out that he went to Texas State. Like, that's me. It's my own baggage. And I get that my wife hates that about me, but that's always going to be, unfortunately, the prism with which I view things, or through which I view things.
And that's fair. That's fair. There are people that we completely agree with you on that. But if people are holding, seriously, with the NIL world showing up, if people hold on to the traditions like Notre Dame and Stanford and Vanderbilt and Duke and Rice and all of these that have already gone by the wayside, Notre Dame and Stanford will too, unless they bend a little bit. Well,
let's be honest too. Notre Dame hasn't done anything really.
Notre Dame has been handicapped by their admission standards.
Yes.
Yeah. They have.
That's part of the reason that there's a guy in LSU trying to talk with a Southern accent right now.
Yeah.
Andy, I know that you did matriculate at the University of Texas for a year. Do you remember if Sean Adams was still doing radio stuff? He
probably.
So he's
I also found alcohol at that time.
Okay.
So.
Which explains why you didn't keep matriculating at the university.
I was asked to take a break.
Yeah, U of H did the same thing to me. That's how I enlisted. But anyway, one of the things we talk about too is if you look at generations of college football, there was a time when the SEC was the conference that was dismissed very easily, right? Like there was a time when the Big Ten ruled everything. Obviously, in the early 2000s, it was in many ways the Big 12 and the Pac-12.
Big 12 is a hell of a conference
back in the day. But there was an interesting comment from Sean Adams, who was played football at Abilene Christian. He famously was recruited to Ole Miss. He's a African-American man. His dad saw the recruiting video of the Confederate and ejected it and went, nope. But he was talking about how one of the big advantages is that if you're a recruit and you go to Arkansas or you go to A&M or you go to Texas, you see co-eds and cowboy boots and jean skirts. And if you go to Iowa, it's hoodies and ponytails. And I think, I think that's part of it too, right? Like people would rather live in the South as far as how the SEC is sort of taken over.
No, I don't know if there's a question there, but that's a statement that I agree with. Yeah.
I think a good part of it is if college football in a very large way has a lot of reflection of the socioeconomic changes in this country, especially over the last 50 years. The population in our country is growing in the Sun Belt. It is growing exponentially in Texas and Florida and those states in between.
I know it's becoming California over here.
But you get some of the benefit of that, right? So you have more people. You have it's the same. It's the reason that a 6A high school doesn't typically play a Class A high school in football. You've got more kids. You've got more opportunities to have stud athletes. So you're likely going to have a better team. You recruit naturally from the base that you sit in. So Texas, A&M, if you are playing the facilities game, you're playing the NIL game, you're always going to recruit well because you have the Texas kids around. Florida teams have those same benefits. There are other states. Louisiana has incredible athletes sitting in that state, and they seem to get better every year somehow.
It's the Gator wrestling.
But it's all of that. Whereas for a large time over the last large part of my life, the Rust Belt was a place you left and you came to the South. Detroit was a dying city, so Michigan didn't do well. Ohio is a wasteland, and it's run by Jim Jordan now, which is another reason not to live there because he might molest you, or at least protect somebody who's molesting you. Who knows? But it's interesting as population changes in this country and where it disperses to. I think Arizona, I mentioned being left out at some point of this whole game, is going to be a huge mistake because that is a state that is growing leaps and bounds from a population standpoint. And so eventually they're going to get really, really good just by sheer numbers. And they've got two universities they're primed to take advantage of that. So it's going to be interesting, but it's the way population is matriculated from the East Coast across the country. You've seen football. Football used to be run by Yale.
Right. 18
national championships. Fantastic. It's not
Georgia built their stadium to look like Yale's bowl. I mean, let's go back that far. Historically, though, I mean, if you look at it, we could go back pre-90s when there was no national deal. There was one game a week, maybe two if you were lucky. And what mattered then was, the players in your area and radio dollars. But for a lot of schools in the South, African-American players either couldn't play there or they didn't want to play there. So a lot of people went north that didn't go to HBCUs.
Sure.
That's where we see these great Michigan teams getting formed, these great Ohio State teams really taking flight. The Penn States that Joe Paterno had, they took off up north. As things changed in the 90s, that power structure moved to the Southeast Conference. I mean, the Southwest Conference broke up, and there was a lot of power that came out of the Southwest Conference. A lot, Big 12 took some of that. And then, of course, the SEC has capitalized on that slowly. But the SEC has grown because the South itself has grown both as far as inclusively. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot better than it was in the 70s for sure. So you're watching the money and the power structure and the opportunity grow in these places. I think that we're continuing to see the morph. I think now television dollars and some power is going to go back up north to the Big Ten. I think when it's said and done, we're going away from Power 5. It will become a Big 4. It may become a Big 3.
I think
a Big 2.
I think it'll be a Big 2, and I think Andy's right. There's 32 to 40 schools that kind of get picked to be part of it will be in. And it's funny because you poked a little bit. You poked a little bit at me with trying to throw the 6 at 6 at me, and I didn't really respond. But we get into my Irish will come out at times. But yeah, one of the cool, unique parts of this show is that we have 3 very passionate fans of 3 national brands of football, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of go around and just sort of, what is your impression, how the offseason went, and where do you see the team ending up this year, and what is a successful season for you? And we'll begin with Andy.
Is that alphabetical? I guess I'm last. Let's go out. So with A&M, we're really at the point where we're in Jimbo Fisher's 5th year. we had a little stumble last year, basically due to injuries. And I know a lot of people will tell you, no, that's Jimbo's offense is antiquated, and there's just a number of problems institutionally with Texas A&M. If we don't win 10 games this year, there's not a single person that's not going to think that was a bad season. And there are some circumstances that could lead to, I mean, yes, if all three of our quarterbacks get murdered in the first game against Sam Houston, you're probably going to have a setback because we're going to be playing a running back at quarterback. But beyond that, assuming health, this team's a playoff contender this year and really should be at this point in the growth curve. We are deep and talented at every point in the roster except possibly linebacker, where we're kind of thin. And some of the hesitation there for me is I don't know who our new defensive coordinator, Mr. Durkin, who came over from Ole Miss, is going to use the personnel that we have. Mike Elko, who was our defensive coordinator, who is now the head coach at Duke, usually played 2 linebackers. So you could have 5 on the roster and be okay. Don't know if Durkin's going to play 3 more, if we're going to play a lot more nickel, if we're going to play dime back. I mean, it's to be determined. But we have 5-star depth, not just coming from the class of 2022.
Right.
Up and down the line. Our secondary is loaded. Little concerned about health coming out of the spring or out of the fall with our secondary, just because nobody's hurt permanently, but a lot of missed practices kind of thing. So building cohesion. The other big question mark for us is how well whoever gets to be quarterback, because Jimbo's not telling anybody. It's a big secret that Haynes King is going to be the starting quarterback. How well and how quickly they can acclimate and take advantage of the full book of Jimbo Fisher. And I'll go back to this offense piece for a little bit and then I'll turn it over. But there's a lot of people, Jimbo's, I think it's one of the things that gets recruited against Jimbo. Well, he's old-fashioned offense. Nobody wants to play in it. Receivers won't get yards. If you look at when Jimbo Fisher won his national championship as a head coach at Florida State, they had 3,000-yard receivers. They had a 1,000-yard back. They had Jameis Winston, who absolutely generational talent, but most universities win championships with generational talent at quarterback. That's not a knock on Jimbo, and somehow it's turned into that. This is a guy that designs his offense based on what his team can do. So if you've seen in the first 4 years that we throw a lot of 10-yard passes and intermediate routes and don't do well in deep routes, that's because we didn't have the personnel for it. We have that personnel now. So I think you're going to see a different team, still heavily predicated on the run, but this is a team that's going to attack other teams and score a lot of points. So I'm really, really looking forward to it and really see a 10-2, 11-1 type of season.
And playing for the SEC championship, you think?
It's so difficult, and you'll learn this in the West because we
Scott,
still have
I'm asking Andy. You can answer for Arkansas in a second.
We should compete.
I know we're gonna have fun, but let's at least have some decorum and let people actually get their
No, I mean,
thoughts out.
the reality of it is there's a lot of really good teams in the West, and unfortunately, no matter how good we are, we still have Alabama to contend with. Now, we beat Alabama last year, and it wasn't a fluky kind of win, other than we had a quarterback who had the game of his life. But it was a sound beating of Alabama. Alabama is going to be geared to come back and make sure they know that we know that was a mistake. But it's difficult in the West because this is going to be one of the better Alabama teams of Nick Saban's tenure. But I don't think anybody on our side is afraid to play that game.
Scott, the Razorbacks.
Big. Yeah, so the greatest thing about the Razorbacks is what stayed the same from last year to this year. 3rd year in a row that you've got a head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator that are together. And when your offensive coordinators are Kendall Briles, who we're not going to talk about his dad,
or him, honestly,
yeah,
but
Kendall.
I'd enjoy that, I guess.
Kendall runs a great offense, and hasn't been too sullied by his dad's reputation. But anyway, Kendall runs a great offense and has passed on other jobs that have come looking specifically for him because of the job he can do. Barry Odom, however, the defensive coordinator, was phenomenal years ago at Memphis. He was phenomenal as a DC at Mizzou. They got the head coaching job, lost that, and a lot of people weren't really sure should he have lost that. But what he can do is coach defense. So there's a lot of continuity coming back from last year. Starting quarterback remains the same, experienced final year player in KJ Jefferson, who gets overlooked. He gets overlooked a lot despite the incredible season the guy had last year, where he was 6'5", 250, and he's now shedded, I think 25, 30 pounds and strengthened his arm. So I think Arkansas is in a great place, both offensively and defensively. Talent and scheme have gotten better on defense and offensively. Even though we lost an exceptional receiver in Treylon Burks, we still have weapons on the offense that we can use, and a kicker who's really dangerous, and a punter who can get the ball high. So the preseason ranking for Arkansas, which is a big deal, guys. Let's remember this. If you look from the time that Bobby Petrino put the bike and the blonde in the ditch, from that point forward 10 years ago until now, Arkansas's been through the ringer. I mean, the Brett Bielema thing.
You need to stop making comments like that while I'm actively drinking coffee.
Sorry about that.
Hey,
sorry about that.
The John L. Smith era was fantastic for all fans of teams that were in Arkansas.
John L. Smith, smile. We're here for the state of Alabama, great state of Alabama. He honestly said that about Arkansas. Like, no, you're in Arkansas, you freaking idiot. And you have guaranteed yourself the interim title will be all you get.
Yeah.
But Bielema fell things apart. The Chad Morris, the Chad Morris, debacle. Thank God they pulled the plug on that. Now you got a guy in Sam Pittman that guys want to come play for. Former players from Sam Pittman, who's never greater than an offensive line coach, really, at the major college level. But former players like, this is your guy. This is your guy. And when we hired him, everyone in the country was saying, I don't know about this. They got an offensive line coach, boy, Archie being Archie, ha ha ha. Lane Kiffin's who they should have got. And so you're hearing about Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach and all of these. And now they look back on it in a 3-year lens, saying that Sam Pittman was the absolute best hire out of that class because he fits Arkansas. We are going to have a better team this year than we had last year when we won 9 games. I do not know if that will be reflected in our record. The reason being, there is one team in the entire nation whose opponent every week saw the postseason last year.
Oh, yeah.
Us. We do run the gauntlet. We open with Cincinnati. We've got BYU and Liberty. And then the Mizzou State game, which is, the homecoming walkover. Well, Missouri State was a semifinalist or something like that at the FCS level last year, and they are coached by the aforementioned motorcycle riding Bobby Petrino. So that should be very interesting as well. I think the floor for Arkansas is 6 wins. I do think we get back to a bowl game. I think the ceiling is actually 11. It just depends on injuries and how things go. Again, we have a team that is experience driven, not afraid of an A&M, not afraid of a Bama, not afraid of an LSU, not afraid of an Ole Miss. But the problem is you got to play A&M and Bama and Auburn and Ole Miss and Mississippi State and LSU and Mizzou and Georgia. I mean, you don't get a week off in the SEC.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you need that health-wise. So postseason, yes. Are we going to be as great as some of the expectations that are happening within the state of Arkansas right now? No, but if there's a crazy fan base, it's ours.
We got about 3 minutes left, so I'll wrap up Texas. Year 2 of Sark. I actually really like Sark. I think when you talk about a guy who's had a lot of stuff go on in his life, I like the idea that what a better example to bounce back than what he's gone through publicly too. I mean, we all saw the downfall, which I think is rough. Obviously, last year wasn't what we wanted. I am excited that Quinn Ewers is going to be starting quarterback. I don't understand why that decision was made now and not made after what could be a demolishing by Alabama, right? I don't understand that, but I'm looking forward to Quinn Ewers. Obviously, the Arch Manning commitment to Texas is huge. It shows that the brand isn't tarnished, that you can still, I mean, if you can be the quarterback to bring Texas back, that's a big deal. But the biggest addition that I'm really excited about is having Gary Patterson on the staff to help with the defense. I think the defense has been very un-Texas-like for the last 12 years. And I'll end this with Scott's favorite impression that I do. Tackling's a big epidemic in the whole country. And it's a real Nate Dale. But that is our first episode of Yell Fight Sooie. We're going to be back every Friday to preview the weekend of college football. Guys, thanks a lot, and enjoy the last weekend off.
Scott's having a spasm.
No. Woo. Pig.
Can you call 911, somebody?
Razorbacks.
What's wrong with Scott?